I'm sure many of you know UCF was founded as Florida Technological University and began offering classes in 1968. It's had a long history of service to primarily Central Florida in the early years, but more recently the entire state. It was placed where it is, so it would be pretty much equidistant between downtown Orlando and the Martin Company in those years and what we think of as Cape Kennedy now. It always has had a strong emphasis on engineering and sciences. So I know some of your questions have been in relation to STEM disciplines. We jokingly say that STEM is in our DNA. So we've had a long history of service to the Central Florida community, and particularly have had great relationships with high-tech employers in the area. I spent my early years in higher education working in smaller private institutions, and as your chairman knows, a small institution has to be nimble. It has to pay a lot of attention to its relationships with its primary constituencies, students, their families, and folks who are interested in supporting higher education. And that was a pretty good background for me in some respects as I began working in a state university, the University of Maine, which was is a land-grant university of the state of Maine. That 4.5-year experience at Maine let me see firsthand the importance of the land-grant model. Now, what you might ask, do I mean by this? Well, the land-grant universities were founded in 1862 through the Morrill Act, and they were charged with working in the areas of agriculture and the mechanical arts, which really meant engineering. That charge had a lot to do with the growth and prosperity of this nation's economy. It gave us that 5 or 10% edge in productivity that let us become an industrial power internationally. And they were the people's universities. The land-grant universities were the people's universities. They were to educate what was referred to, and if you can imagine this, in the 1860s as the industrial classes. Kind of strange wording for a document, but they were the people's universities. Now, why do I bring that up? When I was lucky enough to come to the University of Central Florida, it seemed to me that we were situated very well to do a version of a land-grant mission. Now, we're not in agriculture, and we're not trying to supplant the University of Florida in performing their land-grant mission, or for that matter, Florida A&M also has a land-grant mission, and we gladly concede those to them. What we wanted to do was to try, what I wanted to do at least in the early months, was to try to align our programs of teaching, research, and service around the needs of the regional economy, which is really the heart of what the land-grant university does. Their tripartite mission really is teaching, research, and service, and they are focused on first the needs of the state, but then of course they've gone on to become internationally prominent institutions. I thought if we could do that, if we could focus our emphases in teaching, research, and service around the needs of the regional economy while still doing the things that universities and colleges do in offering liberal arts curricula, for instance, we would have a winning strategy. Now, to focus our activities a little further beyond that, I came up initially with 5 goals, working with some folks like Dan Holzenbeck, who's in the audience today. I came out with 5 goals for the university, and oddly enough, we're still working with the same 5 goals today. First was to offer the best undergraduate education in Florida. Now, you might say that's a pretty bold and ambitious goal, but I'm sure that my colleague, President Genshaft, would say the same thing about her institution. We all want to be the best. How will we know if we are the best or close to it? Well, we'll hear that from our students and their employers when they leave us, their professors in graduate and professional school. So offer the best undergraduate education in Florida. Second, achieve international prominence in key programs of graduate study and research. Now, notice that word key. Right away, you could see in a UCF, a regional university certainly in those days, with 21,200 students, a very limited budget, we certainly could not do everything. So we had to pick the areas that really mattered the most. And again, our reference point on that is our region's economy. Third, we wanted to provide an international focus to our programs of teaching, research, and service. Certainly in those years, I started March 1 of '92. You know how really abuzz we were with the whole opportunities that we saw, the range of opportunities we saw with the collapse of the Soviet Empire. I had just helped found the first American university in an Iron Curtain country for 50 years, American University in Bulgaria. It's still operating today. So we wanted that international focus. We thought that was very important, not just in areas of trade, but as we used to say, that there's an international economy in ideas and ideals as well as currencies. So we wanted to prepare our students for what we saw as the future. I think that the wisdom of that goal has been borne out. Our fourth of 5 goals is to become more inclusive and diverse. I would submit that there's not an institution in America who shouldn't still have that goal. We had it 20 years ago. We've stayed with it. Why inclusive as well as diverse? Well, we're a reasonably diverse group here today. We would be just as diverse if we all hated one another, but we certainly would not be inclusive. And we believe that it's the really important thing is to go that second step and become inclusive as well as diverse. And then finally, we want to be America's leading partnership university. And that's proved to be a very crucial goal for us. Think about it. Certainly in a fairly young university, you're not going to have the resources you'll need to solve the most significant problems that are before your community, your state, your nation. I would submit there's really no organization or individual who has that kind of resource acting alone. You have to be able to bring people and groups together to really do the important stuff. So that's really what we set about doing. And 20 years later, we've grown to a very high research university. We're serving 58,000 plus students. We believe we're poised for really great progress in the coming decades. And I would say that our goals and that view of serving the region first, being in it as well as of it, have served us and Central Florida and all of Florida very well.
Well, thank you, Doctor. We appreciate that introduction. And since you started off on STEM, we'll move right to STEM. I'm interested right along these lines. What are you doing? And you've indicated you're doing quite a bit, so we'd want to hear about that. Do you think it practical for you to try to expand that because of the prevailing interest in it?
Yes.
And what thoughts do you have about how the state university system should respond to the interest in STEM? And from our perspective, and perhaps we can talk about this too, it's costly, we understand. It's costly and it's highly competitive. For the people that can do it and do it well, and those people who can get the grants, and the graduate students who can participate. So any comments you can help us with along those lines, we'll be grateful for.
Well, let me tell you first a little bit about what we're doing. If you look at our fall class for 2011, 8 of the top 10 declared majors for those students are STEM disciplines, according to the National Science Foundation's classification. Biology led the list. We're really attracting a lot of students today who are very interested in pursuing education in STEM disciplines. Engineering has always been very strong at UCF. This fall we had 6,267 students in the College of Engineering and Computer Science. The growth over the last 3 years in enrollments has been 10%, 10%, 16%. So it's a popular and growing area on our campus. We've got the 9th largest undergraduate enrollment in engineering in the nation, according to the data that we have. We're a good bit smaller relatively in graduate education. That's something I think we need to expand in years ahead, and that is very expensive, as you mentioned. But we're 40th in graduate enrollments in the nation. We've done, I think, very well in students into the disciplines, and I think we could do more, but that will require us to do some resource shifting internally. It also requires, if we're going to push it a whole lot farther, it's probably going to require some additional appropriations. Now, there are a lot of approaches that can be taken. You can differentially price. I would say it might make sense to look at using modifications to Bright Futures as a way of making STEM a bit more attractive. If the Bright Future Award were larger, for instance, for a student who was pursuing a degree in a STEM discipline, that might be a real inducement.